Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hockey Talk. Today, we're talking playoffs. Yes, today we are finally talking about the playoffs, which has been long overdue. It's been a long 82 game season, especially for someone like me who's been watching the Canadians for most of those 82 games. So I'm excited to talk some playoff hockey and watch some playoff hockey starting Monday. But as of right now, we only have two playoff formats or matchups set. The rest are going to be set up later tonight. So hopefully, the rest of this weekend, I'm going to be pumping the rest of those series out for you. But tonight, we're talking Wild Blues, which is this video, and later tonight, we've got the Kings and the Oilers squaring off, and we'll talk all about that, which I'm looking forward to as well. These are two series I anticipate being very good, especially the Wild and the Blues, who are playing off in round one. However, there is a bit of a con to the Blues and the Wild playing off round one, and it's simply the fact that they probably shouldn't be. The Blues and the Wild are the third best team in the conference, tied with Calgary for second, really, with 111 points, and the Blues are fourth with 109 points. There's just no scenario where it makes sense that these two teams are playing round one. This is too good of a matchup to be having in round one, but it is the way it is. Personally, I think that we should be doing the 1 through 8, which would have the Wild playing LA, who is the 6 seed, and the 4 and 5 seed Blues and Oilers squaring off. But I digress. Another day, we'll have a conversation in more detail about my flaws with the playoff system, but it is what it is. This should be a good series regardless. I know I'm looking forward to it. I think this is probably my must-watch series of round one. If I had to give my opinion of one playoff matchup, one playoff series that I think you've got to watch, I think it's this one. I think these two teams are pretty evenly matched. I think we're talking about two really good teams squaring off. So, without further ado, let's get into it and let's check out by the numbers. So, as you can see, right, by the numbers, these two teams are pretty equal when it comes to goals for per game, right? They're both scoring about 3.75 ish, right? Blues at 3.77 and 3.72 for the Wild. We're talking about 0.05 difference in goals for per game. We're talking about two very good offensive teams. The big difference is special teams. We'll talk about that in a second. But goals against per game is another area that you would think the Blues have a bit of an advantage, and they do in some regard. But since the trade deadline, it's kind of flipped. And the Wild and Blues are both really hot since the trade deadline. And again, we'll talk a little bit about more on that in a second. But just worth mentioning that since the trade deadline, the Wild's goals against per game is down to 2.6. So that number of 3.06 was actually much higher, and they've been able to chip away at it and bring it all the way down to where it is because of their good goaltending that they've had since the trade deadline. And of course, as we all know, they were pretty busy at the trade deadline. They acquired last year's Vezina Trophy winner for the best goaltender in the NHL in Marc-Andre Fleury. And really, it hasn't been him that's been the difference maker so much as his arrival, because Cam Talbot, who was the Wild starter previously, has taken his game to another level. And so you've got two goaltenders that are playing pretty well for the Wild, and they're still scoring 3.8 goals per game, so they're still obviously scoring a lot of goals as well. So things going well for them. For the Blues, they're scoring a shit ton more goals, excuse my language, since the trade deadline. 4.5 goals per game. Talk about making a huge difference. The goals against, 3.1, a little bit higher, but again, when you're outscoring your opponent by a goal and a half per game, you don't really care. And so they're clicking, right? The big difference between these two teams really comes down to the special teams. Oh, by the way, worth mentioning, Wild in the 21 games since the trade deadline are 16-2-3, and the Blues are 15-3-2. So these two teams are mano a mano. They have played twice since the trade deadline. The Blues took both of those games, as you can see in the bottom. They're 3-0 against the Wild this season. Both of those games, 4-3 and 6-5 in overtime. So again, very close games since the trade deadline. We're talking about a goal difference in each, and both teams getting a point. So This could be a very, very good series. I kind of expect this one to go 7 games. But the big story is really going to be coming down to the special teams. The Wild special teams were in the bottom half of the league. I think their penalty kill was in the bottom 10, which is not good company to be in. Whereas the Blues, they had the second best power play in the league behind only Toronto, who features a 60-goal scorer on their team. So you're probably doing something right when you're just behind them, obviously. And they had, I think, the 5th best penalty kill in the league at 84.4%. So we're talking about a team that, whether they're a man up or a man down, are one of the best in the league still. So this has been well documented that these two teams are on a crash course to play each other, with Colorado kind of at one point looked like they were running away with the conference. They really closed the gap, but unfortunately we still have to watch them play in round 1, so one of these two teams has to go home in round 1. But I mean, this is so far just an incredible matchup that I'm really looking forward to. So, by the numbers. Again, we look at these numbers. It's worth mentioning that you should take these numbers with a grain of salt. Reason being, everything starts at 0 when the playoffs come around. And that doesn't mean that these numbers don't matter, but it just means that it's a fresh start for everybody. And, the Blues can go 0 for 4 in each of the first 2 games, and all of a sudden, the lethal penalty power play that you thought they had isn't making the difference you might want. So we're talking about a fresh start. We're talking about 2 teams that are going to play really well regardless. And I really look forward to this matchup. I really think this is going to be a heck of a game after game, really. I think this could go 7 games. And it'll be interesting. I think the Wild have their work cut out for them to kind of close that gap in the special team department. Because, the numbers are going to reset at 0, but who knows if the Blues can kind of keep going. The big thing is with the Blues, obviously we talk about how good their power play has been, but in the playoffs, things get tighter, calls maybe a little bit less than you might expect. You certainly can't live and die by your power play because you'll fall and crash and burn, generally, which some people may have a problem with, but it's the reality of the NHL. So it is what it is. And with the Wild, it's the other way around, of where it's like they need it to be better regardless of if the number started 0. They do not want their power play and penalty kill to be holding them back. Now, their power play at 20% is not too bad. Like, that's good enough to where it's not going to lose them many games. It's probably not going to win them as many games as, say, the Blues, but it's not bad. The penalty kill is the real question mark. 75%, that's not good. That means your opponents are operating at about 24.23%, right? We're talking about a really good power play. Every time you play the Wild, it's not great. You got to fix that. So hopefully they can figure that out. I think Dean Evason is one of the best coaches in the NHL for the Wild. So I think if there's a coach that can kind of make the adjustments and really kind of change the tune about a power play going into the postseason, they can do it. So that's kind of by the numbers. But there are other things to keep an eye on in this series. So with the Wild, we talked about the goaltending, right? Cam Talbot has emerged and Marc-Andre Fleury is there. That's really one of the question marks you have with them now, though, is who do you go with come game 1? And then let's say he wins game 1. Do you keep rolling with him? Or do you keep doing what you've been doing, which has been a tandem of where you kind of switch with each guy and say, okay, it's Marc-Andre Fleury's turn. Cam, you've got the next one. Come playoff time, you generally don't see teams stick with one or rotate. They usually pick a guy and roll with him. It's really hard to do when for 20 games in a row, and really the entire time that Marc-Andre Fleury has been there, you've rolled this way. So that's really going to be one of the main things we're keeping an eye on now. So that's really one of the big question marks that we have with the Wild is what's the goaltending situation look like, and can they get reliable goaltending, and how short is the leash if you choose to go with one guy, right? Let's say you go with Campbell and you lose game 1 4-0, and he didn't have the greatest of games. Do you immediately go, okay, we got to go to Fleury, or do you roll with the guy who's played really well since Marc-Andre Fleury's got there to the point where you chose to go with him in game 1? Some question marks. The Blues have their own question marks in net too, right? We know they've got Ville Husso. We know they've got Jordan Binnington. Binnington is the guy for them. He was the one that led them in their cup run. He's been the guy for the last couple of years. But his numbers this season are not great. A .901 save percentage, 3.13 goals against average. whereas Ville Husso in 2 more games has a 921 save percentage and a 247 goals against average. So we're talking about a significantly better stat line for him, but he doesn't have the experience in the playoffs that Jordan Binnington does. And so it's like, do you roll with experience or do you roll with the guy who got you here? And I think if you're the Blues, you got to go with Husso, but maybe they choose to go with experience. We've seen it before. I think the Panthers kind of thought that they could do that with Bobrovsky last year instead of rolling with Drieger, who got them there. And it kind of didn't matter who was in net. They really just couldn't find a way to stop Tampa. So we'll see if that's the case with a Blues offense averaging 4.5 goals a game. Does it matter who you put in net? We'll find out. But this should be a really good series. The other thing, we got some really good players for both teams. For the Blues, we talk about some guys having great years. How about Vladimir Tarasenko? Right, they were giving him away for free. 34 goals, 82 points on the air in 74 games. How about Robert Thomas, the 22-year-old, 77 points in 71 games. So some real firepower. How about Buchnevich? 3 guys. Who would have thought the Blues' really 4 leading scorers would be Buchnevich, Kyrou, Thomas, and Tarasenko. Not Ryan O'Reilly, not David Perron. That's pretty surprising. That's really interesting. But it talks about the depth they've got. How about this? 8 guys with 50 points or more. It's pretty good. And then, of course, we know what the Wild have. They don't have 8 guys with 50 points or more, only 4. But how about Kirill Kaprizov? 106 points this year. Franchise records in goals, assists, and points. What a season he's having. There could be some real fireworks in this series in terms of offensive and goaltending storylines to follow. So, with that in mind, I think it's time to log a prediction. And we're going with the Wild. I'm comfortable with Dean Evason leading the charge. I think they were really battle-tested and showed just how much potential this team has when they lost in 7 to the Golden Knights last year. The Blues lost in 4 to the Avalanche last year. Now, this is a much better Blues team than the one they had last year, but I don't know. There's just an energy around this Wild team that's much more exciting and worth keeping an eye on that I don't see with the Blues, right? This is not like the Blues of 2019. That was a team that had the energy that you just felt like they were going to do something special. I feel a little bit the same way about the Wild this year. I wrote an article about them on my website. You can go read that talks a little bit about that. There's a lot of things I like about this team, and Dean Evason behind the bench, I think, is one of them. Kirill Kaprizov, that guy's a lot of fun to watch play, especially in big moments. So I'm looking forward to this, and I think the Wild have this. I don't see a scenario in which this series doesn't go 7 games. These two teams are too evenly matched, and again, I know the Blues were 3-0 in head-to-head this season, but I just don't think head-to-head records matter that much in crunch time. So we'll see. But this is going to be a really good series. And again, I say that if you're going to watch one playoff series this year, it might be this one. We'll see what happens in round 2 with other matchups. But as of right now, regardless of how the playoff matchups get formulated, I think this could be the best matchup of the first round. So, thank you so much for watching. Again, keep your eyes peeled for the second playoff matchup, the Kings and the Oilers preview coming out later tonight. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I really would appreciate it if you do. And also, I want to hear from you guys. So let me know who you think is going to win this series. Let me know who you think might be the most interesting playoff matchup. If you don't think it's the Wild Blues, maybe it's Leafs versus Lightning, or maybe Leafs versus Bruins. We still don't know what's going to happen there. Let me know if you disagree with the playoff format, or if you like the playoff format, right? This playoff format's designed to get more divisional matchups, so maybe you like the aspect of having those. I personally think it's a little overrated, but let me know what you think. Maybe you love the playoff format, and I would love to hear your opinion on it. So, with that in mind, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.